Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of MSP Ignition. Today's webinar will be focused on how MSPs can go to market and build their HIPAA stack. So the mission or the objective for today's webinar is really to empower and support MSPs in the audience on how you can leverage HIPAA to attract and retain premium clients. There's a significant opportunity in the healthcare space right now around HIPAA, which is underserved, so it's an opportunity for MSPs. Gavin, can you talk a little bit about some of the fundamental requirements of an effective compliance program?
Sure. And so from a broad overview, the HIPAA law was written somewhat intentionally vague. It's very cumbersome. And it's somewhat that way because it needs to cover such a large, diverse sector of both business types and organizations. You've got covered entities, the organizations that we would typically think of as being involved in healthcare, that are involved in the payment, treatment, and operations of healthcare, as well as the business associates like yourself that service them. But regardless of the type of organization, the size of the business, there needs to be these 7 fundamental elements of an effective compliance program. Health and Human Services puts this out directly on their web page, and what's going to constitute effective is obviously going to be relative depending on, the organization in question. But each organization has to have a set of written policies, procedures, standard of conduct. They have to designate an individual to be the person that's responsible for their HIPAA compliance above and beyond their normal course of business activities. Doesn't have to have any specific, compliance certifications, but they have to be put down in writing. And then what's going to constitute effective training, education, lines of communication, internal monitoring and auditing, that's going to be relative based on the organization, but they have to have something in place to cover those aspects. They also have to have a set of well-enforced standards that are publicized with uniform disciplinary guidelines, meaning you can't have one set of disciplinary guidelines for the C-suite and another set for the administrative employees. You also, very importantly, and this has created a lot of fines, you have to have a methodology for promptly responding to any detected offenses, breaches, cyberware attacks, ransomware attacks, et cetera. So those are the 7 fundamental elements as stated by Health and Human Services. They can be found directly on their website as well.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. So today, our focus and the agenda is really going to be around helping you find more clients, leveraging the best tools in your stack to go and support and provide a great solution for those clients, be able to deliver those valuable services and add-on capabilities. And starting off, we really want to focus on mission impossible to mission profitable. So before we get into all the detailed content, let's talk about our presenters today. So you just heard a little bit from Gavin from the Compliancy Group at Axient. We're very excited to be working with the Compliancy Group. We think in the market overall, relative to business availability, there's some key macro trends around cloud, around security, and around compliance in particular. There's a lot of growth opportunities for MSPs, so we want to support that growth. But with that, Gavin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the Compliancy Group?
Sure. I come from a long background of compliance. A lot of that had to do with the security sector with FINRA and NASDAQ and the SEC compliance. I spent about 20 years working with hedge funds and brokerage firms in the compliance space, and I have more recently, within the last year, come to work with the Compliancy Group, where we focus directly on HIPAA compliance. We have been at this since 2005, so going on 14 years. And within the last couple of years, our offering to add HIPAA compliance as a solution onto the MSP stack has grown that business to close to half of our revenues now in a very short period of time.
That's great, Gavin. And I understand that you work closely with a significant amount of managed service providers and actually helping them go to market and build their capabilities for addressing the healthcare space, right?
No question about it. I'm at channel events throughout the year, whether it be NextGen, HTG, Chartech, Robin Robbins, or any number of lunch and learns that we do with your organization, with Axient, to talk to MSPs about how to increase their client base, how to specialize on this very, very strong vertical to help grow their business, increase their MRR, the profit on that MRR, and really just help drive new business.
Great, great. And I'm the moderator today. My name is Aengus Robertson. I'm CMO here at Axient, and I've had about 20 years of experience in the technology space in various enterprise B2B companies, including compliance companies. And my focus is really on understanding the market trends and making sure that we can solve those with technology. So if anybody has any questions today, as we go through these slides, we've got a fair amount of content. We'll be moving fairly quickly. We will be sharing the recording to all the registrants after the webinar. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them in the question panel. I'll be looking for those and make sure to pass those on to either Gavin or Tommy. So with that, Tommy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Well, thank you, Aengus. Name's Tommy Wald, and I'm a president of TW Tech Ventures. I'm a former MSP business owner and CEO. I'm an MSP since the 90s, and so the Reader's Digest version of my history is I, had a very successful run and became a very successful MSP through the 2000s. And had a successful exit like many of those before me as well. And since then, I've been out there back providing consulting and advising services back out to other MSPs and the distributors and other channel vendors such as Axient. Just published a book called The MSP CEO, Your Guide to Building a Successful MSP Business, which is full of best practices and anecdotes and observations, perspectives from some of the nation's best, like Paul Dippo, Gary Pica, and Joe Panettiere and others like that as well. And it's really, we focus today more about how do you build a next-gen MSP. So a lot that you'll hear about me talk about today is really from the perspective of what are we doing to keep evolving and to evolve your MSP business today into some of these more profitable areas of managed services. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tommy. And I know a key part of you being able to build your business and sell your business was around that, building the right stack and having that vertical focus and go to market. So I know as we go through the slides, you'll be speaking to that more.
Absolutely, I'll be looking forward to it.
Great. Okay, let's get into the market. So when you look at potential clients and the healthcare market overall, healthcare is actually the #1 vertical for MSPs from a revenue perspective. And there's over 5 million SMBs in the US that are subject to HIPAA. 94% have increased their budgets for MSP specific services. And of course, there's a big value in actually outsourcing that IT, especially when that specialization and expertise is required. And closely related to compliance is the cybersecurity as well. So as you go into the healthcare space with that HIPAA story, there's the opportunity to build your security capabilities and also your business availability capabilities as well. And Gavin,
I just want to add one point to that market. When we talk about the 5 million SMBs, don't think that it's just your standard healthcare organizations. There is an entire area of SMBs that are termed business associates that act as subcontractors and vendors. You've got your electronic billing companies, call centers, lawyers, accountants, any organization that is working with healthcare organizations that somehow could possibly come into contact with protected health information, they fall under the HIPAA umbrella. They are utilizing your services, and they are also ideal candidates for the HIPAA compliance add-on to your services. So that's why this market is so broad. It's much more than just, your standard dentist, optometry, cardiovascular surgeon. It's all of these other organizations that service into that space as well.
Great point. Yeah, thank you, Gavin. And when you look at those clients and those SMBs, can you speak a little bit more to some of the risks that they're facing around healthcare and some of the HIPAA requirements and the impact that it has to their businesses?
Sure, Aengus. When we talk about the risk for the clients, it's really a perfect storm. And by that, I mean that 88% of the ransomware attacks last year were perpetrated against healthcare organizations. And the reason that ransomware attacks are so heavily concentrated in healthcare is that most of financial firms have now tightened up their security systems. From I would say the last 10, 20 years, they all have become very, very strong in their cybersecurity, whereas healthcare has been slow to react. So it's far easier for a ransomware hacker, so to speak, to get in and perpetrate a ransomware attack against a healthcare organization. So you've got just an enormous threat from that aspect. At the same time, you have audits from a federal level that have increased 400% since 2016. You have the OCR, the Office for Civil Rights, that's the investigative and enforcement arm of Health and Human Services. You've got CMS, Center for Medicaid Services, and you also more recently have state attorney generals now auditing as an increased revenue source. In terms of who's compliant, who's getting fined, 73% of covered entities, those involved in the payment, treatment, or operations of healthcare, fail their audits. The average fine is now $1.6 million. In your space, in the business associate space, the failure rate is above 90%. So the risks are real. Let's talk about what you're doing and how you could prevent that. You can do absolutely everything that's right from an MSP's perspective. You can keep them locked up as best you can with the most advanced set of security tools that you have available to you. 76% of the ransomware attacks and the breaches last year would have happened anyway, regardless of what you did. Because what's going to happen inevitably is you're going to have human error, meaning that a staff is going to disable a password or a security protection. Someone is going to open up a phishing attack in an email. Somebody is going to lose a device. And what's important in terms of protecting your clients, because you can never protect everything, as you can see here, you can do everything right, and 76% of the breaches would have occurred anyway. That's why you need an effective compliance process in place, because if you made a good faith effort to reasonably assess your risk, if you put the appropriate policies and procedures in place to address those findings, you would not be fined for these breaches. So it's incredibly important to not just be buttoned up from a cybersecurity side, from an IT side, but also to have addressed all your risks with appropriate policies and procedures, et cetera, that we take care of at the compliancy group. Fines, I mentioned, the average fine's $1.6 million. Lawsuits and reputational damage. I think I saw a slide last week at another event that 6 months after a ransomware attack, an SMB would be out of business. So not only reputation, but your entire business is at risk. I think that's pretty much enough on that. I just can't stress enough how much risk there is for not incorporating a compliance aspect to your business.
Great, thank you, Gavin. I think you highlighted some really important pieces there. One is just how many businesses actually fail audits and how much that audits are actually increasing year over year. And then on top of that, just the amount of money that's involved with the fines relative to those failed audits. And then, of course, even if they have a great security solution, the MSP is providing a great security service, you still have that human error and all the risk that's associated there. So just points out the need and the demand for compliance in the healthcare space. And Tommy, I know obviously a big part of your success was on verticalization. Can you speak just from an overall strategy standpoint when it comes to building your MSP business, why vertical is so important?
Yes, absolutely, Aengus. And, as this slide indicates here, when you look at the MSP, top 500 MSPs in North America, close to 80% of them all have some type of vertical specialization. And so what this has allowed them to do is leapfrog everybody else, mostly because of their focus on that. And what it's really allowed them to do, though, is align their business goals and internal expertise, as we've highlighted on this slide here, and allows you to get higher margin offerings. And so that's one of the key things. And as we talk about compliance and HIPAA, that's certainly a very key part of how you demonstrate your skills to be able to perform for the healthcare space. But more than that also, though, is that these healthcare companies, these doctors, are looking for those that they think know and understand their business the best. And so if they look at you versus another MSP and everything, everybody does the same thing we're hearing out there, right? We have help desk, we have VCIO, we do NOC and monitoring of everything. And so the differentiator there is that you the customer perceives you as being more of a business expert and understanding their business. And that's where, again, where compliancy comes in, because you're really able to more successfully articulate the risks to their business and what they're doing. And more than that, you have a very well-defined offering for it. And even, this just isn't coming from me. When you look at the reports out there, like from channel E2E.com, they're all coming up with the same conclusions. You're able to charge a higher price per user, which results in higher gross margins. When you get into these types of business verticals, you have less churn because you are more sticky, because you have more of that tribal knowledge and such like that. And with that comes a higher business valuation, because since you're charging more of a premium, you're also having a higher EBITDA, which therefore that really what drives, the valuation of a company today. So all these things together make up for a very compelling reason why every MSP out there today, especially in today's space, should be looking to develop something like a healthcare vertical or a technical specialization of some sort.
Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Tommy. So are you ready to support this growing and lucrative market? Let's talk about how we work together. So really, this is an equation that takes the best of what you provide today in your services as a managed service provider with the business availability suite from Axient, and of course that HIPAA and healthcare specialization around compliance from the compliancy group. By putting these components together, you really stand a chance of differentiating yourself and capturing market share in a growing market. So Tommy, perhaps highlight just the strengths on the managed service provider side and what the businesses within MSP really focus on and differentiate where.
Yes, certainly, the client relations, every MSP business owner out there I know today feels like their biggest differentiator is, we give great service, I have great relationships with my clients. And that's exactly where you should be, because you should have more of a partnership, being a trusted partner there. And as we talked about already, a lot of the SMB business owners today, if you put yourself in their shoes, they're looking for someone local who's credible, who they know they can trust, they have a good relationship with. You're not just some big, huge company coming in that, you're just working with someone, and that you're really providing them with good solution advice. They look for that from you. So, the purpose of an MSP in these types of relationships is very important for the end user customer. And it's up to the MSP to bring solutions and other partners in your partner ecosystem to the table to help put together a complete solution for your customers in order to be able to really serve them the best and to keep them as a long-term client.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make, Tommy. Mark Haskelson, the CEO of the Compliancy Group, is actually co-chair of the Business Applications Advisory Council, which is an advisory council that's part of CompTIA. And I actually am on that council with Mark. And a key priority and goal of that Business Applications Advisory Council is connecting software as a service providers to the MSP channel and really helping MSPs change their business model. As we move very rapidly into this cloud space, the fundamental business model around MSPs is changing as well, because more and more you're dealing with less on-prem and more services in the cloud. And as part of that, it's important to, of course, build your stack around that, but also focus a little bit more on business process, on integrations and automation, and then beyond that, what are the value-added services? So moving away from, the traditional services that an MSP might provide.
Right.
So with that, let's dive into the specialization expertise that the Compliancy Group has to offer. So Gavin, back to you.
Great, thanks. So I think that there's, within the industry, there's a common misperception that somehow security in and of itself equates to compliance. And while security is certainly a valuable component of overall compliance, it is merely one aspect. And there are a lot of MSPs and some of the other HIPAA vendors that merely address the risk assessment. That's the combination of 2 of the 6 required self-guided audits, meaning the IT security risk analysis questionnaire and the asset and device audit. The results of those audits are going to validate your past recommendations and justify a more advanced set of next-gen security tools. While that is included in our offering, you can see that there's quite a number of other aspects that are required to truly have a comprehensive and effective HIPAA compliance process that will stand the heat of an audit. We have absolutely everything that's necessary from start to finish to cover the entirety of what is required for compliance. So a little bit of background on who we are, where we came from. We have a SaaS-based solution, meaning there's no agent or any software to install on your end user client's computer or server. It sits in the cloud. It is an absolutely comprehensive tool, not only for the auditor, the client, and all of the employees, the entire organization, so to speak. We are the nationally recognized industry standard for simplified compliance, in that over half of the 82 or so medical associations are endorsing our seal of compliance and our methodology as the preferred methodology for their members. So that's over half of the medical associations in the country giving us their stamp of approval. And with over 80,000 end users on our platform at this time, and being involved in at least 2 to 3 federal audits at any given time over the last 14 years, currently I think we're involved in 5 or 6 because the auditing is up. We have never had a client fail an audit, so certainly a proven methodology. I also want to point out here that we do sell both direct and into the channel, but we are not competitive. Our direct client sale is in fact a lead to you. And I want to make sure that that's clear, because when I go to channel events throughout the country on an ongoing basis, I hear a number of vendors talking about how they're channel only, channel only, channel only. And in most applications, that's very important. But our situation is somewhat unique in that when I sell to a healthcare client and they go through that initial self-guided audit process to show their good faith effort to reasonably assess their risk, and they have trouble initially with the security risk assessment aspect, they're going to be asking my organization for a qualified managed service provider, and I am in turn going to be turning that lead over to somebody in that area. So I want to make that very clear. We are client and channel, but non-competitive. All right, so why would you want to put compliance as a solution onto your stack? I want to talk about kind of a philosophical question about how we focus on security and how we think of security. You think of security as a managed service provider as the tools and the systems that you deploy from an IT and a cybersecurity perspective. Your client does not. Your client thinks of security as peace of mind, freedom of anxiety. And when you come into that client with a line item proposal of firewalls and RMM, et cetera, you're actually increasing that anxiety to a large extent. The client is thinking, do I need that? Do I not need it? Am I paying too much? Am I paying too little? When you come in with a bundled package of standardized next-gen advanced security tools with HIPAA compliance as a solution on top of it, you are now solving your client's problem, not just the symptoms. Again, through this process, we're going to validate your past recommendations, and we are going to justify that new advanced security service that you actually ideally want to deploy and service. That's going to make you more efficient. Your techs are going to have less false tickets to work on. They're going to know exactly what they have when they go out or when they're responding to a ticket that they do get, and it's just going to make you far more efficient. Obviously, focusing on this verticalization is going to allow you to sell a stronger set of tools. What does that mean? That means increased MRR, that means increased profit on that MRR, and it means a higher quality of client that's more profitable. Compliance is actually going to help pull this package through for you. We like to say here at Compliancy Group, we do the work, you get paid. And, I know that sounds a little like, oh, really? Come on. But the only aspect of compliance that you're going to have anything to do with is the services and tools that you deploy and trying to sell anyway. We are just going to validate and justify those services for you.
So, Gavin, we have a point made by one of the folks in the audience that MSPs who don't have a lot of experience in the medical field, if they just jump on in, it could get them into some deep water quite quickly. Can you speak to how compliancy group works with MSPs who don't have as much experience in the medical field and how to manage kind of an entry into a new complicated and a lot of risk and liability such as healthcare entering into that new kind of vertical and how to manage
Right.
that.
Okay. Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic question. And I would say, a third to a half of the MSPs that come on board have zero healthcare accounts when they're coming on board. They've had a previous kind of trepidation about entering the space because of worry about liability and what could possibly happen. So let's talk about knowledge and let's talk about liability. We don't expect any of the MSPs to be HIPAA, compliance experts. We're certainly not MSP experts by any stretch of the imagination, but we have an entire maybe roughly half of our organization is dedicated to the MSP channel, which means that we have dedicated partner relations managers, dedicated MSP channel managers, MSP consultants that can address certain issues with what do you put into your stack, how do you sell it, how do you position it, and then perhaps most importantly, to get an MSP up to speed on the talking points, we have an entire partner portal that MSP resellers have access to, which has maybe 9 to 12 brief video clips, 5 to 9 minutes in length, about HIPAA in general, how to position it, different talk tracks, sales, marketing material. We put on email campaigns, white papers, webinars, checklists. So the marketing side and the knowledge side, we're taking over for you. All you're doing is making that introduction. We're closing that deal for you. Now let's talk about liability. We are actually decreasing your liability in this space in that if you want to serve medical community, and we've talked about what a great aggressive vertical this is to pursue, if you go through this process, you are going to go through the process of taking your MSP through our compliance as a solution methodology, meaning that you are going to become compliant. You have zero, you have liability, but in the extent that we've never had a client fail an audit in 14 years, you are protected. And I want to talk about one specific aspect of that protection. Not only are you going to go through all the self-guided audits, address the gaps with remediation plans, have appropriate policies and procedures in place, but you're also going to have business associate agreements in place with all of the healthcare clients that you service. Our business associate agreements are written the way the law is written, meaning that they state that both parties understand that they fall under the HIPAA law. They're both responsible for their respective business practices under the law, and that one party cannot transfer their liability to the other party. So in the event that one of the medical practices that you're serving or any of the other organizations that fall under HIPAA does something that gets them in a jam, they cannot transfer that liability onto you. And we know full well that if you go through our process, you will have a fully comprehensive and effective HIPAA compliance process in place for your MSP. Make sense?
Great. Yep. Thank you, Gavin. And Tommy, can you speak maybe just a little bit about your experience in entering the healthcare space and how to do it in such a way that you can manage that risk and not get into too much trouble too quickly?
Yeah, on this next slide, if you would, we'll talk to that. Basically, what I would say that you do is you really look at what your, who are the vendors that you're really going to work with in this space. Because whoever you're going to work with, know that they're going to be considered an extension of your own staff and that the client's going to look at you as being responsible for that. And part of what I was just highlighting in this slide here is that from just a recent report sponsored by Continuum that it's very obvious that customers are holding, SMB customers are holding the MSPs responsible for any type of attack or breach or anything of that nature and would readily litigate them in that event. So these things and working with someone like the compliancy group where you can mitigate those issues very well with a solution like that is very, very beneficial. Or having a vendor like Accident where you know that you're going to be able to recover all your backup, in the event that ransomware comes in and that you're going to be successful in that. So the other thing is, and we'll talk about this in another slide here, I think, is when I talk about if how do you get into the healthcare space? Gavin just mentioned maybe you don't have any. When I sold my business, I ended up out of the 330 something clients I had, approximately 48 of them were all doctors' offices and healthcare. And somewhere when I got up into the 20 space, I started realizing I needed to get more standardization in what I was doing. So what I did do is look through, my customer base of healthcare clients and really focused in on just, 2 or 3 key healthcare clients that or vendors that all my clients had somewhat in common there. So, we weren't trying to tackle every EMR or practice management solution out there. That would be really challenging. So my suggestion here is that you focus on one or two that that your customers would have in common in the event that you don't have any, or maybe that's how you go about developing it. But the purpose of this is that when you do this, then your service delivery becomes more efficient. Your customers become happier, and you start becoming more of understanding of the business workflow. You're able to sell higher into the IT value stack, and all that represents more value to the healthcare client and helps you again continue to differentiate your MSP from others. And so, but the key to this is not being able to, it's not trying to shoot at everything that moves, because the healthcare industry is very, very fractured, very diverse in the forms of different types of practices and such like that. So again, in my practice, I found the more profitable healthcare companies that could afford my services and want to pay for that were people like orthopedic surgeons and plastic surgeons and folks that, pediatricians had a very difficult time with some of my fees. So, just be very practical and intentional about who you're targeting and when you're going about developing your healthcare practice there. And at some point there also, what I think I may have this on the next slide here, Aengus, but when we talk about engaging vendors, engaging those strategic vendors and developing a relationship with them. And what that means is that, the better you get at supporting their solution, they're going to recognize that. And like Gavin was just saying, when he comes across clients, healthcare customers who aren't happy with their MSP, they ask their trusted vendors, hey, who would you recommend? And I had a friend, an MSP partner out in Birmingham that did exactly this. And he would take the account executive for the EMR solution. I think he was working with NextGen, or maybe it was Greenway. But he would take these guys out to lunch every month. And the next thing you know, these vendors are then referring business to them because they have this relationship, number one. Number two, they've taken more time to understand the actual application there. And so I would have EMR vendors come in and train my service desk staff, not trying to do level one, but at least whenever they got a problem with their solution, they didn't look like a deer in the headlight. And that all in all really, again, continued to increase our value, our response time. The EMR vendor loved us because we lowered their tickets, for their set of clients that we've worked with. So those are some good ways to go about considering how you go about developing this vendor ecosystem. And one of the key things we talk about also is really learning the vernacular. That's why you want to go to healthcare conferences, understand their vendor ecosystem. How do you communicate to the doctors and office administrators? All these things, again, are differentiators, and why today it's more important to spend time in these other conferences where your actual end users are getting their business information.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tommy. And just on a previous slide, Gavin, we had a question around the second bullet point, the validate your past recommendations. Can you explain that a little bit more? Does that apply to software providers or clients, work providers?
Sure. So let's talk about the major buckets in terms of IT that are required to be in place from a HIPAA perspective. When we talk about validating your past recommendations as well as justifying new advanced tools, what we mean by that is that the results of that security risk assessment, which again is a combination of an IT security risk analysis questionnaire and an asset and device audit, those are going to point to gaps that might be in place within an organization. So largely those gaps will fall into areas of some methodology for system monitoring and auditing, threat detection, et cetera, encryption, business continuity in the form of backup and disaster recovery, as well as secure communications. So in the event that they don't have gaps, that's going to show that, hey, you did the right thing. In the event that they do, that's going to show them that, hey, I told you you guys needed this. I recommended it. It wasn't just because I was trying to add excessive tools onto your system and increase your monthly bill. It was because they're required to, one, keep you safe from a cyber perspective, but two, keep you compliant. So in that regard, results of that initial self-guided audit process are going to validate past recommendations and justify a stronger set of tools.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. So a key part, as Gavin just mentioned, of HIPAA and compliance is the business availability capability. And so at Axient, our vision is to protect everything. We do that through our business availability suite, which is comprised of 5 solutions: business continuity, Office 365 protection, cloud-enabled file services, or secure file sync and share, disaster recovery as a service, and of course, our Axient Cloud. Our solutions are HIPAA compliant. We work with the compliancy group on that. We also support the overall value proposition offered by the compliancy group as part of the overall solution. And we deliver value not just to yourselves, but of course to your clients. On the Axient Cloud side, our data centers are on both coasts. They are SSAE 16 Type 2 certified. We use HP-based hardware that supports the highest security standards for reliability and performance. All of our data is encrypted, both in transit as well as when it's at rest, using the Advanced Encryption Standard 128 encryption, meeting the government's requirements for FIPS 142 standard for top secret documents. Data center access is strictly limited, enforced by the use of CCTV, biometric technology, and 24/7 personnel. And the original version of the data and applications, once backed up, can only be accessed by authorized personnel that you identify. So we make sure that all the data stored in our data centers is secure and reliable and performant. In terms of our cloud-enabled file services capability, or secure file sync and share, our Axient Anchor product provides that document management capability and also the file storage and sharing supporting the HIPAA requirements. So that means from a document management standpoint, you can control who has access to what files and when. And then also clients can share links and email attachments securely and provision guest accounts to specific folders by leveraging the different capabilities. And of course, finally, supporting unlimited capabilities around the audit side for compliance purposes, for leveraging extensive logs and reports for tracking those files and making sure you understand where they've been dispositioned and who they've been accessed by over time. Then when it comes to disaster recovery, we are also HIPAA compliant, and for any requirements relative to healthcare and HIPAA for disaster recovery, there's generally 5 areas that matter. One is your data backup plan, then you need your disaster recovery plan, your emergency operations plan, testing and revision procedures, and also understanding the analysis relative to both all your applications and data, which we support through our business continuity solution, supporting industry standard RPO and RTO capabilities, and again, that level of security with our Axient Replicate product. Okay, great. So now we've talked a little bit about the compliancy solution. We've talked about Axient, what we provide in terms of business continuity and document management. And of course, Tommy's spoken a little bit more about the benefits for MSPs in terms of building that HIPAA stack and also that vertical specialization. So now in terms of how you go to market, what do you need to think about? So I think very important here is making sure that you can educate your clients. You can provide those risk assessments that Gavin's spoken about, partner with those right solutions in terms of providing that complete capability, but also that trusted vendors, and you can get that level of support that you need from your vendors in terms of support and also providing those best practices. And really, as Tommy said earlier, looking to standardize on those key best practices, key processes, and also solutions so you can optimize the service that you provide to your end clients. So Gavin, do you have anything else you'd like to add here on kind of the risk assessment side and also how you support the go-to-market?
Yeah, sure. I would just like to reiterate the fact that we have, a large portion of our organization dedicated to the MSP reseller program with individuals that will work with you every step of the way. And while it is a great idea to learn as much as you can within reason about a vertical, we, again, are not asking you to become HIPAA compliance experts. So You may come into an engagement with an organization where they say, hey, Joe, I like you, I trust you, I like what you're saying. Tell me a little bit more about the HIPAA compliance aspect. And that's where you contact your partner relations manager with my firm. You set up a go-to-meeting demonstration with somebody like myself or the rest of my team, and we will walk them through the process of what's required to be HIPAA compliant, how we simplify that process, how it is absolutely crucial that they have an understanding and compliant MSP. That's where we highlight your services, and we close about 70% of those engagements. So, we have a lot of collateral to get you up to speed from a knowledge base as well as the sales and marketing. But the bottom line is that we really want you to guide that organization to us for us to close the deal for you. And again, as Aengus was pointing out, if you put compliance as a solution onto your stack, you are going to sell a stronger stack in a very great vertical to be going after. It's going to increase your MRR. It's going to increase your profit on that MRR. You're going to win new clients, and you are actually going to be doing less work.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. And maybe, Tommy, you can speak just a little bit more in terms of how you've built your businesses. Any tips or tricks for selling and marketing to healthcare specifically?
Yeah, I'll continue to just get back to, how do you expand your knowledge and understanding of the healthcare workflow? Really, being able to talk the talk, to speak in their vernacular of how they go about doing it. This MSP, a couple of them actually I know of that have done this very successfully. And they've gone about it and approach even where they've hired like a nurse practitioner in one case, someone who just saw the opportunity. These folks out there in healthcare like that, nurse practitioner, your office administrators, they're very familiar with the technology and the systems and of course the workflow that goes on and around that. So some have taken this, adapted this practice of going outside the industry, hiring more of someone that really knows the business and the workflow, and inserting them into this role because it seems to play very well if you've got this person, really advising now all your other healthcare clients who can really, like I said, speak. They can go out and walk with the doctors on patient encounters and know all the protocols with that. Certainly, as you're going out promoting yourself, you're having a very targeted, highly targeted, marketing campaign. Specific dedicated landing pages, et cetera, blogs and things of social marketing, going out and joining the associations of these healthcare folks. So I belong to this local healthcare administrators association that met on a monthly basis, and we were sponsors. And so it kept us, in there in the local community of these practices. And that's how, regardless, I'm not a doctor, of course, but these clients of mine, that's why I had so many of them, because I became perceived as more of a business expert in their field and such. And it wasn't because I went through and had any particular, I was not a certified VAR for any of these EMR practice management systems. I was, just kind of an outlier, but it was good enough to where, it really provides that additional level of support that the local doctors want and that these EMR vendors really desire, because it keeps their clients happy. So, you look at it as a win-win-win type of scenario when you go about it in that way.
Makes sense. Great. Thank you, Tommy. So our objective here was really to, at a very high level, talk about the opportunity in the healthcare space, what can be done in terms of providing value to the client, and how you as a managed service provider can differentiate and go to market in a powerful way. So we just wanted to give you that quick overview and high level, but Gavin, perhaps you can speak a little bit more to just how that can be accomplished, both in terms of client value and building that capability on the managed service provider side.
Sure, yeah. I'll just hit from the client value side. Again, if you add on compliance as a solution onto your ideal stack, it goes back to when I was talking about how you perceive security versus how your client perceives security. So you really will be giving your client peace of mind that now they can confidently go back and focus on their business, understanding that their IT systems will be up and running, they'll be secure, and they will also be HIPAA compliant. So they can go back to focusing on what they do best. From your perspective, you know, you're going to receive our seal of compliance. You're going to be very much differentiated in a vertical against your peers. It's a strong vertical to go after. You will be a premium provider in that HIPAA compliance justifies that advanced set of next-gen security tools. And really, it's going to drive new clients and increase revenue and increase profit on that revenue that will also be a stickier revenue in that this is an annual subscription agreement model. So these clients are going to stay very sticky to you through this process. You're going to be that much tighter to them. Our retention rate here at Compliancy Group is over 98%. So you would have to have things go terribly awry for them to want to disassociate with either us or you once you do secure that client. And, you know, from my perspective here, I will just say, as part of the MSP reseller team, we will do everything in our power to help drive that business to you and support you in every step of the way.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. So with that, make sure to reach out to Compliancy Group and Axient to learn more, and we can take you through the solutions in more detail and also the best practices around that vertical specialization and building out the solution stack. So we do have one more question here, and perhaps this is for you, Tommy, and that is, what are some key requirements for looking at vendors for healthcare in particular? Anything in particular come to mind?
Well, I would say probably the key requirement is really making certain that that vendor conforms to the target customer that you're looking to develop. You know, don't try to sell a Mercedes when the customer is looking for a Honda. That type of scenario. So, you know, be certain that you find the solution that fits the market space you're really targeted to, number one. Number two, you know, make certain that these guys are certainly vetted and they have a great reputation. So that's, you know, again, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, you know, your reputation is on the line just by extension of working with vendors. And so it is key there to find someone that you know is dependable and reliable, because you'll be held responsible. So that would be probably my top two requirements. And of course, there's additional, obviously, without knowing the particular attendees' background, but I'll be happy to talk about that offline if they wish.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Tommy. And as we send out the recording and the slides to the registrants, we'll also be providing contact information for any follow-up. So thank you everybody for joining us these last 50 minutes to learn more about the healthcare space and how to enhance your go-to-market in the healthcare and HIPAA market. Look forward to working with you in the future, and please join us for the next MSP Ignition webinar. And thank you very much, Gavin, and also Tommy, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.